Hello and welcome to Drive the Bid, which is brought to you by AutoHunter.com, which is our online auction, which has cars going live every single weekday. So if you're interested in buying or selling your collector car, be sure to check out AutoHunter.com. Now, today I am Jeff Sutton, and I'm joined by Shiekhi on my left and Diego Rosenberg on the right. And today, as usual, we're going to be talking about the news. Our topic of the day is car features that should be standardized across the board. And then, of course, we'll highlight some of our favorite cars currently live on AutoHunter.com. But before we get too far into that, we do have a sponsor. And so this video of Drive the Bid is brought to you by LandAirSea. So you can keep tabs of all your valuable assets from the palm of your hand. So remember, with LandAirSea, theft is temporary. Visit LandAirSea.com to order your LandAirSea GPS unit for your classic vehicle. As always, I'll leave this on the Camaro so we don't lose it during the duration of the podcast, or it doesn't get stolen, or we'll remember where it is.
Just to be clear, it's a 1967 Camaro Z28.
Right. Okay, so moving on. Obviously, the first thing we're going to start off with is the news.
Yeah. So the current generation of the GT-R is still around, but it's been updated for 2024.
Just the way you said, it's still around. It's still kicking.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They keep going with it. So they've got 3 trim levels this year. There's the premium as the base model, if you can use that term. The T-Spec returns, and then of course there's the Nismo. So prices start at $121,000 basically, and go up to $229,990 for the GT-R Nismo. So part of the
Sign me up.
Yeah, exactly. I'll take 2. Part of the updates are redesigned body components to increase downforce and reduce drag. The Nismo gets a new wing that has 10% more surface area than before, and it also comes with a limited slip front differential and
More understeer.
We'll see. Another big part of this news is the return of the T-Spec. So just as it's positioned in the trim level hierarchy, it splits the difference between the premium and the Nismo. So it has the same amount of power, 565 horsepower, as the premium, but it gets some upgrades like wider front fenders, Nismo carbon ceramic brakes, raised wheels, and a Mori green interior.
Did it specify if it was an electronic differential or a mechanical differential in the front?
Not that I remember. I just remember seeing the limited slip part.
Part of me assumes it's almost got to be electronic for the front, right? Because you don't want it to be full-time limited slip, because otherwise that will induce a ton of over or understeer for an all-wheel drive car. But if you had it fully locked for a launch, let's say, you'd have much better acceleration.
Oh, yeah. I would imagine it's electronic. And another part of the T-Spec is it's available in 2 exclusive colors. They're kind of throwbacks. So there's Millennium Jade, which was used on the R34 V-Spec 2 NUR, and then Midnight Purple, which is it's what they call a modern interpretation of the Midnight Purple 3 on the R34 V-Spec.
I think this one's really nice.
Yeah, I like that color.
The Millennium Jade. Yeah, it gets replicated in wraps all the time. I can't believe how much these cars cost. In 2012, they were like $91,000 to start, with $96,000, I think, getting you the black edition or whatever. So these have gone up in quite in price, and I'm not sure the aesthetic update and front limited slip differential would justify a $30,000 increase.
Well, speaking of pricing, so I went back to the 2009 GT-R press kit.
Okay.
And at the time, of course, horsepower was down, it was 480 horsepower. But at the time, the base model, just the GT-R, was 69,850. And according to a quick and dirty calculator I used online, that equates to $98,770 today. The GT-R Premium was $71,900, which comes out to a little below $102,000 today.
Yeah, I assumed there would be something in there with inflation, because obviously just in the past few years alone, the car market has been all over the place, especially skyrocketing for certain things. So I would assume that there would be some value differences in there, but it's crazy to think about the prices with how long this car has been around. And I know that there's been all sorts of changes, especially suspension tuning wise, that's changed as well. I believe the cars were notoriously getting softer after the initial introduction because people were not happy with that, despite the fact that they performed better. So I think they were technically slower.
Yeah, I think when they, what was it, a few years into their introduction, I think they were hitting sub 3 seconds, 0 to 60.
Yeah, these cars definitely set the benchmark for what modern supercars are. Basically turned everything on its head. And we're basically like, hey, look what we made. And everybody was like, you can do that? That's allowed?
Yeah, it was, I only spent a few days in one several years ago. It was probably 2015. And what really stood out about it to me was it had this kind of guttural sound to the engine. You know, it sounded, it was very distinctive. You know, it didn't sound refined, but it also kind of sounded menacing because of that. And the closest equivalent I can think of, I imagine like if you could be shrunk down and fired through a laser beam, that's kind of what driving this car is, you know, wide open throttle, because it was immediate and frightening how fast it was. And going from like 20 to 60 felt like going, you know, it felt like you were going 20 miles an hour faster than you actually were. Whereas some cars, they're so I don't want to say refined and you know, imply that this was, you know, crude, but some cars are so smooth and so, you know, kind of isolated that they feel like they're accelerating more slowly than they are. But this, I mean, you know, just regular acceleration felt much quicker than it would in a different car.
Sure. Yeah, these are pretty legendary vehicles. I'm not hating on it so much that it's still around. I'm glad it's still around because especially the engine in here, the VR38 as it's called, is it's an amazing engine. First of all, they're all handcrafted, hence the nameplates that they have in the center and stuff like that. But these can regularly be turned up to 1,000 horsepower, no problem. And then there's all sorts of people that build them for 2,000, even 3,000 horsepower. Obviously, that requires a lot more money at that point in billet blocks and things. But these engines get regularly used in Formula Drift, putting out over 1,000 horsepower. And so these are just amazing engines. So obviously, Nissan building more of them is not a bad thing at all. I just know that there were a lot of people expecting an R36 rather than the unveiling of 2 more cars. But the heritage nod is cool with the return of some older colors. So I give them props for that. So pretty cool. All right.
I think, no, let's go on. Let's go on.
All right. So this is my bit of news here. Rimac, which is the correct pronunciation, or you'll hear a lot of people call it Rimac. Rimac has set 23 records in a single day with their 1,813 horsepower four-wheel drive Rimac Nevera hypercar. So if you're unfamiliar with Rimac, they're actually a Croatian-based manufacturer, and they've gotten so much in investments and even just sort of backup from help from people that they actually now have the namesake of Bugatti to sort of work on as well, that they'll be carrying forward technologically. So there's a lot of hype behind them. And obviously a huge mantle of responsibility. So here is the essentially press release from Rimac. And here you can see all of the various records that they set. They're mostly acceleration records. Obviously, this being an electric car with almost 2,000 horsepower. I think it's got like 1,700 pound-feet of torque, in addition to having 4 electric motors to drive each wheel. So it's all-wheel drive with instant torque. You can see there that it did 0 to 60 in 1.74 seconds. That is insanely fast, and it ran a quarter mile in 8.25 seconds, which means the Rimac Nevera would technically be banned by the NHRA from running down a drag strip.
I would like to one day see one of these companies pop up from a country that is very easy to pronounce the names, that sounds good to English tongue, so to speak.
I mean, if you want to give the American pronunciation, you can call it Rimac, but Rimac is the correct pronunciation for the company. Ferrari sounds great. The models they have sound fine. We tend not to have these problems with the traditional supercars. I'd say Lamborghini has a lot of weird pronounced, Pergunta is a Lamborghini.
Yeah, but that's kind of like, let's think of it in the past when these companies were either established or establishing themselves. A lot of the names are relatively easy on an English speaker's tongue and ear. Like Lamborghini, what's an Islero? I don't know. I guess it may be some kind of bull, but it's something that just kind of makes sense, even if you don't know what it is. And, from Eastern Europe, it's just a little bit different. So it's just kind of, I'm not here to say they should change anything. They should be who they want to be and who they are. But it's just a completely different world to my ears.
Yeah, well, just what these guys are playing around in, this field that they're playing around, is also insane. I think all of these Rimac cars are like $2 million cars minimum. This is their second or third car.
If it was like the Rimac Ocelot, then I would be having this conversation. At least there'd be something that would be identifiable to my ears.
Vera's not bad.
It sounds like the cream my wife uses on her face.
I think their first car was literally called the Concept 1. So it was Rimac's like Concept 1.
That sounds like a prototype.
It's the first car. Nobody ever knows what to call their first car, right?
Concept 2?
Koenigsegg, one of their later cars is the 1-to-1.
Yeah, that's different, though.
All right. Next bit of news.
Okay, so this was posed a few years ago. I don't really remember when, as the Chrysler Airflow. This was going to be an EV. And now we know that it's not going to be called the Airflow, and it's also going to evolve from this being, so to speak. They've decided to take it a little bit further, and I'm glad for that because I just thought it was a little bit tepid, at least the styling. The design is one thing, but the styling another. I just kind of thought, So the Airflow, I like the name, but it doesn't really resonate with people, especially modern people who aren't into old cars.
I was going to say the name comes with like a 30s car, right? 30s Chrysler?
Yeah. And, I like, out of all the American manufacturers, I think Chrysler does the best job with mining their heritage. At least they have done.
Ford's pretty good.
Yeah. But, it's like, I want to see the Chrysler from the 90s, and I think their survival depends on it.
I'm not sure most of us want to see cars from the 90s. Like if Chrysler brought back
the Ram, the Viper, the LH cars, which are like not even used cars anymore. They're junkyard cars, but
different level.
Chrysler introducing the 2024 K car.
But sign me up.
But the thing is, they were doing something different than the rest of the industry, and it caught everyone's attention. That was Chrysler's MO.
And stealing other people's names, like the Hornet.
Well, yeah, but they also bought out AMC, so it makes sense.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know, that one bothers me a little bit, the borrowing heritage. But I guess Chrysler's done that before. You could argue the Viper and even the Prowler technically stole heritage to exist.
Whatever the case may be, I would like, we don't really know where the Chrysler is a brand. We don't know where they're going to be in the future. It seems like every few years something's going to there's going to be an automaker that's going to be disappearing, especially now that they're owned by, they're really a Dutch company now. I still think they're Stellantis. Is that what they're called? You see, I don't even know the name.
This is the parent company.
I think they're Dutch, like from an incorporated point of view.
Are they based in the Netherlands?
They became Stellantis when they were partnered with
PSA Group.
Yeah, right. So, but how would that become Dutch?
They might be headquartered in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I don't remember, but maybe.
Whatever the case may be, Dodge is a strong brand. Jeep is a strong brand. Ram is a strong brand. Chrysler is not.
Right.
And I don't want to see them disappear. And it's just the nature of business. So I'd like to see something good come out of this, even if it's an EV.
Yeah, the name seems kind of funny to me. It feels, I get that airflow never necessarily referred to the combustion aspect of the engine, but just hearing the word airflow and thinking about an EV seems a little weird to me, I guess. But what I want to point out is that at least in this concept, which I guess they're going away from, but it looks like the badge might be hollowed out. The Chrysler sort of wing badge looks like it's hollowed out, so it made me think of the Chevrolet flow tie.
Yeah, that's an airflow tie.
Yeah, airflow tie. All right. So with that, let's move on to our main topic, which is vehicle features that should be standardized, or basically this is almost like our pet peeves of cars that we've dealt with in another way. This is, I believe, yours, sir.
Yes, and this is something that I've noticed recently. It's not on every vehicle, but I've noticed a couple vehicles out on the road lately that their turn signals are low mounted, like in the bottom fascia, which on one hand, it stands out because it's different and it's unexpected. But at the same time, my eyes just don't naturally go to that part of the vehicle when somebody's signaling. So to me, it would make more sense to have, to make mid-mounted or higher mounted turn signals standard.
Yeah, I agree with that. The what's funny is the first vehicle that comes to mind that has that is what I consider to be a very ugly vehicle and a vehicle I did not enjoy driving, which is the standard Hyundai Kona. That vehicle has them in the bumper or something like that, and then it has the regular tail brake lights up high. Yeah, did not like driving that car, but that's not a very attractive vehicle to me. Especially the rear is probably the worst part of that car.
Which is saying a lot for Hyundai these days.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Kia and Hyundai kind of share who gets the good stuff, right? They're like, you get a winner.
Sometimes
you get a winner. You get a winner. It's funny because going off this photo, I thought initially you were going to talk about maybe like the names.
Oh,
it'd be like, let's have names that make sense, or like make the name stand out a bit.
Kind of like the Croatian hypercar.
Yeah, but I mean, Navara refers to like one specific car. These days you look, Mercedes numbers used to tell you what engine was in the car, right? Even kind of BMW, there was kind of a rule of thumb that you can kind of go off of for the cars. These days, it's like the GLE 450 could now have a 3-liter 6 in it. And you're like, oh, great. That 450 meant nothing.
Yeah. You just got to kind of memorize it. And then, probably in a few years, it'll change anyway. So,
right. All right. So this is mine. All right. So I know the photo seems out there, but let me explain. So if you've ever driven a manual car with cup holders, most of the time, the cup holders are always in the worst spot. That if you have a drink in there, you're like, how do I comfortably shift with my cup in the car? So it's like, it's fine if you're on the freeway, you're just leaving it in your overdrive gear or whatever the whole time. But most of the time, it's like, if you're just driving somewhere casually, or maybe you're like kind of spirited with your coffee in there on your way to Cars and Coffee in the morning, sometimes you can't I like to rest my arm a little bit flat. So I just kind of pull the shifter straight back. But sometimes you're like now, reaching over and awkwardly pulling the shifter back, trying to tap it back, which is like kind of like the the rally driving Group E stuff, where you watch them do like the like all the Jackie Chan from the One Driving movie where he's doing all the crazy shifts. That's what it makes me think of with certain cup holders, but just make sure that the stick doesn't get in the way. I know that automatic people don't have that problem, and that most of these manufacturers are like building one center console, no matter the transmission, but it would be nice if there was just a little bit of thought put into it. Like for the ND Mazda Miata, you can actually move the cup holders. So I remember if it was like just me in the car, you could use that cup holder in the top right. So it was off to the side. You didn't have to worry about it. You could still comfortably shift. Or if you didn't need to reach it that badly, it kind of stores them in the back, kind of back behind the seats a little bit. And then they're not blocking your access to your wonderful manual transmission.
Yeah. And that's something that drives me nuts about my car. And, I always envision when I got my Mustang, like, oh, yeah, I'll go on these romantic drives with my wife and everything. And just this past weekend, she always likes to have a drink in the car with her, especially when it's hot.
Yep.
And, we had a couple, and I was like, baby, can you just hold one of those? And,
yeah.
And I was doing that awkward spider thing,
Yep.
Drove both of us nuts.
Thing's the same way. The two cup holders sit right behind the transmission. So when you're shifting, you're like, yes, this is such a pet peeve for me. And I'm a huge cup holder fan as somebody who owns other manual cars that don't have cup holders. So
I'm guessing the 944.
Yes, needs cup holders, doesn't have them. But they're also not blocking me from shifting currently. So there's that.
Yeah, you win some, you lose some, right?
Yeah, just some ergonomic appreciations would be nice for manual transmission owners. I know we're in a minority at this point, but would be nice.
Yeah.
Okay. I have rented a car several times, and then it's like I'm in this mad dash to get to the airport on time, and I got to fill up the gas tank or I'm going to get ripped off by the rental company. So then I go to the gas station, and I have no idea how to open the gas tank. I look inside. Is there a lever in the bottom? Is there a button on the bottom of the dashboard? Or do I just press, is it a spring-loaded lid? I don't know, but just having one simple way would make my life a lot easier. And yours too.
Enter the Honda S2000, I think, has a notorious reputation for having one of the hardest to find gas cap releases.
Where is it?
Oh, I think it's like hidden somewhere in the center console or something like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's not in like a conventional place. Somebody will watch this and then yell at me because I was incorrect for where it's at. But I know that the S2000 in particular is supposed to have a really bad release. You know, I can, not all cars have releases. They probably should, because locking gas caps that you buy from like auto parts stores aren't that great. They're annoying most of the time. God forbid you lose the key. But it would be nice if there was some sort of standard feature to add, or at least location. You know, you think either here on the floor or even just below. I've seen some cars that have like electronic pop release buttons that are like, you know, off to your left knee, where they put the miscellaneous switches that you may or may not use.
Or even on the, you know, near the door pocket. You know, there will be one there
too. Yeah.
But it'd be nice to have it in one place for all the cars. You know, it's just like, you know where the turn signal stalk is, you know where the gas release is.
Yeah, at least for modern cars.
Now this is a small one. I love keyless entry. It's, you know, it's very useful. Most cars have it these days, but there've been one or two in the past where I was, you know, like I'd be getting ready in the morning, I'd unlock the front door, and then I needed to put something in the back, so I'd go to the back, but it didn't have keyless entry on the rear doors. So I either had to touch the front door handle a couple of times to unlock it, or use the key fob. You know, so it makes things a little slower, a little more awkward. It'd be great if every vehicle that had keyless entry had it on both rows.
So yeah, so I mean, there's kind of an asterisk to that, because if I'm not mistaken, certain vehicles like SUV hatchbacks, if they have keyless entry and they do have a hatch, if it's optioned, it'll usually have that foot release as well. So that's usually like the keyless entry version, because I've noticed some vehicles, it only works if the car is locked. You can't do the foot thing if the car isn't locked. But if it's locked, let's say you're coming out from the grocery store and your hands are full, then you can do the foot thing under the tailgate and then the hatch opens up. But again, that's if your car even has that feature, which isn't standard, but maybe it should be for SUVs.
Yeah, maybe.
Hatchback vehicles, which are usually offered as utilitarian vehicles for most people. So
I will say this though, I've tested a lot of vehicles in the past that had the, you know, motion activated liftgate, right? Mm-hmm. So many times. Yeah, I just looked like a lunatic out there just waving my foot.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I said, it has like specific use cases, and it does feel very consistent. You're just moving your foot around, and you know, what if you're carrying 45 pounds of weight or whatever, and you're like, oh, I'm just gonna run this out to my car real quick. It's no problem. You don't need to come with me. I have the opening lift gate. But now you're out there with your 45 pounds of weight. You're like, ah.
Yeah, you got a watermelon and a 5-gallon bucket of paint, you know?
Right. Yeah. I would almost say even standardized keyless entry. I've seen some companies, like for the most part, it seems like it's kind of standard. Same thing, you know, tap here on the door handle or hold here on the door handle and it unlocks, and hold it here to lock it. But I've seen some that are like trying to make it almost, well, they think they're making it more convenient for you. Oh, just walk away. Once the key fob is 30 feet away, it automatically locks. But to me, I like the peace of mind of just being able to lock it anyways. So have that as a secondary feature and still let me lock the car.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
With the button, just so I can, you know, touch the button, hear the lock, and go, okay, my car is locked, rather than just knowing like, oh yeah, my car is supposed to lock when I'm 30 feet away.
Yeah, exactly. Especially like if you're downtown or in an area that you're not used to being around, you know, you just want that instant peace of mind.
Right. At minimum, they can still have the feature just in case, but at minimum, I should be able to unlock and unlock the car with just touching the same button. All right. This is mine, and this comes as news of what GM's decision recently made to say they're getting rid of CarPlay and Android Auto in order to work with Google and develop. The first vehicle that was mentioned was the 2024 Blazer. EV Blazer is going to have their new technology. But for me, I think having that functionality with your phone, especially when you're not allowed to be on your phone while driving, to have that integrated into your car so you can get your maps, your podcast, your music, whatever, instantly, I think is super important to me. And it seems like, each year it's just about every manufacturer offers CarPlay and Android Auto, except for GM apparently as of recently. But for the most part, it seems just about every manufacturer offers it. I know in 2022, there were still some cars in production that were not offering it. But in 2023, I don't think I've gotten any press cars yet that haven't had it. So it seems fairly standard these days. But this just seems like it would kind of be a no-brainer for me, especially for people that don't like driving and are going to want some more like sort of creature comforts and amenities while driving. This seems like it would be the minimum to improving somebody's driving experience.
Yeah, and this just seems like a case of, not to get too into the weeds on the GM thing, but if it's not broke, don't, if it's not broken, don't try to fix it.
Yeah, well, we'll see if they come out with anything worthwhile, but I have a feeling it would be hard to beat, because one of the studies in one of the articles I read brought up the fact that over 53% of people with like a cell phone use Apple. And so it's like, okay, you just got rid of CarPlay. They're working with Google, so obviously you could argue maybe there's some compatibility for certain phones that might be better that way, but like, who really knows what that compatibility is going to look like?
Yeah, I think, just as with anything new, and especially a relatively clean sheet redesign, which this sounds like it's going to be, obviously there's going to be some, break-in and teething issues.
Right.
But it'll be interesting to see, what the advantages are to that. But anyway, I do agree with you. I mean, yeah, it would be great if every car came standard with Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, because it's easy to use. I mean, it's especially if wireless would be even better. But yeah, it's very easy to use.
Yeah. So here's the thing: can Apple Play or CarPlay, whatever, could that be improved upon? Let's see what the competition in this case, Google, comes up with GM. See how they can raise the bar. Let's wait and see.
Yeah, no one's saying that it can't be improved upon per se, but I think they would have a hard time improving upon something that is made to integrate specifically with Apple. You know what I'm saying? Like working directly with Apple to manufacture a product that they can use with their Apple phones is one thing versus Google developing a product. Odds are the direct compatibility with an iPhone may be, so.
I think as long as Apple doesn't try to create a hurdle for them, everything's going to be fine.
But Apple's done that before.
Yeah.
So.
Right. But in how have they done that? When did Apple do this?
Well, it's just whether it's using their own proprietary version of something, so that way you have to go through the Apple version if you want to make something.
But work. when it comes to something like GPS, something in an automobile, I think it's going to be a little different.
I don't think they'll have access to Apple Maps on a Google code developed,
which is perfectly fine because Apple Maps sucks.
Yeah, I have no problem with Apple Maps, but it integrates to your voice, hands-free stuff. I prefer it that way. It's certainly better than any maps that have come pre-installed on a vehicle. Any vehicle that has a Maps software from the factory, I have not enjoyed at all.
When I have to look up businesses and things like that, I use Apple Maps, but when I'm driving, I use Waze, and a lot of people use Google Maps.
So I guess I'm the only one who uses MapQuest still?
Yes.
Okay. Noted.
I only use the North Star or a search engine.
I rely on my friend Rand McNally.
Yeah.
I can only drive at night because that's when the North Star is. That helps me to wayfind my way to where I'm going.
Okay. Is this also about the radio, or is this just about headlights in this case? Because we have discussed a little bit of both.
Yeah, I would say this is your headlights.
Okay. So a pet peeve of mine is having controls on the turn signal stalk. I think having a turn signal should be for turn signals, maybe for the high beam too, but stop it from being so busy. Put the headlight switch on the dashboard.
Who are the manufacturers that are doing that these days? Because remember, it seems like 90s and mid-2000s up to the mid-2000s, it was on the turn signal stock a lot. But I'm trying to think of like modern cars, and I think most modern cars generally have these dials now.
I think I won't swear by it. It's like one of these things that you just don't think about when you just drive. But I think my Subaru has it on the stock.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. And I might as well make the point also that, and this is on the drivers, headlight switches have an automatic setting, and a lot of people, I think, have it on the off setting and drive with their daylight headlights on. And that's why you see a lot of people driving around without any taillights on, because they don't realize their headlights are on. And I think that's a design that needs to be improved upon. I don't think it's the fault of automotive designers, but because people are not using their due diligence to putting on their headlights properly, let's try it from the back end and see.
Yeah, which is a shame. I think the auto headlight features tend to work really well on most modern cars.
Yeah.
With the exception of like if you drive under, you know, one of those bridges or like just an overpass, just briefly. Sometimes I've seen them flash on. So if people aren't a fan of that and then they turn them off when that happens, I could understand that. But I'm surprised people don't leave it on. I've never seen a reason to turn it off fully for anything. Because I mean, worst case, you're running your headlights for a little bit. And most of these days, most headlights are what, LEDs? So you're not like the life expectancy of them is considerably longer than the old bulbs that we're used to. So,
I mean, if you see an 81 Monte Carlo on the street, chances are he has his headlights on. That's for sure.
Yeah, but the headlights aren't that great from cars from the 80s.
Oh, they're good enough. I mean, the thing is that people can see you.
Unless they've done LED conversions, everything seems pretty dim to me on cars from the 80s.
All right. Yeah. So remote start is a great thing. Not every vehicle comes with it. And I'm not even saying that every vehicle should. Obviously, you know, manual transmissions can't come with remote start. But for the ones that are available with remote start, I really wish it would be standardized that it would be on the key fob, because I've in the past tested vehicles where, you know, you get the key fob, there's no at least immediately apparent functionality for that. Maybe there's some combination of buttons you could press, but you know, some manufacturers make it very easy to see, right? But then, you know, there were vehicles that had remote start, but you had to use their app on your phone. So you got to go to the app store, sign in, download it, all that. Just put it on the key fob. You're going to have it anyway, you know? Mm-hmm. So it just drove me nuts.
Just even manufacturer apps, the amount of manufacturers that try to push an app onto somebody, like there are very few circumstances where that app makes sense, but you should never force somebody to have to use the app for certain software access features. I remember there were all those commercials that were like, you know, the family's coming home off an airplane and it's super cold outside and their car's in the parking lot. And so they, you know, open up the app to set the thermostat and all that stuff before they get there. And then that has a cool aspect to it, but you shouldn't limit, you know, remote start. Like, for example, like if you parked your car with the heater on, you should just be able to remote start it. And then by the time you walk out to it, you know, and do the normal get into it after you've remote started it, then it could hop up. I would almost assume these days that somebody would be able to make the technology to do remote start for a manual transmission car, because with all the rev matching stuff that exists and how they, you know, essentially can help the car shift anyways, even with a manual transmission, I would assume there's almost some way that they can hold it in neutral somehow.
Yeah, you got a good point there. It's probably, I don't know if automakers are pushing, you know, working on that, but yeah, if they are, the debut of that can't be far off.
Yeah, and maybe just like, you know, the same way how you get in a remote start automatic car, right? You have instructions that you then have to do to basically tell the car, like, yes, I am the owner, I have the key now I'm in the car. So then you know, press your buttons with the remote in the car, and then the car will start. To give you full access to everything. But I would assume with the manual, you know, it'd be something like, hey, put the lever in neutral, and then, you know, make sure the e-brakes disengage, put your foot on the clutch, and then press the start button or something like that.
Yeah. It's possible to do. I mean, the engineers in the automotive industry are brilliant. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, maybe one of these days.
Yeah. All right, this is mine. And so a lot of new cars, obviously there's a lot of new cars that have full digital displays, but there's still a lot of cars that have this style where they have some analog gauges, and then they have some sort of multifunction display in the middle. That's usually a digital and adjustable. My pet peeve with this is there's a lot of cars that exist where it seems like the analog gauges are almost purely
Ornamental.
Ornamental, or like, almost nonsense. Like this one on the left is clearly a hybrid vehicle of some sort, right? That has the eco, power, charge, all that type of stuff. But most people, I think, will generally like to have their miles per hour in the digital reading so they can see their exact speed and therefore be, safer drivers to an extent if it's not already on display in vehicles with a heads-up display, which it probably should be. So my pet peeve is when you want certain things, like let's say you care about your economy because you're driving a hybrid, like in this case. Well, if you have your range, average fuel economy, and average speed on screen, you don't have your actual miles per hour. Your digital readout is not there anymore. You have to use your analog gauge, which in this case, we can see that this one jumps by 20s. So let's say you needed to make sure you were doing 5 miles an hour or whatever. You're like, okay, I'm at this awkward quarter reading between the next numbers. And so it can be a little bit harder to read at first glance. And some are purely ornamental where it seems like you can't even read them at all. And so it would be nice to just have, like, always have the speed on display somewhere, even while you're scrolling through your other menus that are in your multifunctional display. At least that's what I think. That's the thing that comes to mind all the time. I'm like, why can't I have both? And then maybe those people will just yell at me and tell me to get a car with a full digital display, which I don't want because those are too heavy.
And we had talked about my old Mazda 3 had a digital display inside the tachometer, and it still had an analog speedometer, but it was like the best of both worlds.
That used to be more common in like that sort of crossover phase between we're getting digital displays, but also have analog stuff. And then nowadays, I think this is pretty much standard, and you don't quite see that as much anymore. Yeah, pretty interesting feature. It almost seems like some of these analog gauges, they might as well just get rid of in some instances if they're not going to make them usable.
I want to say in the past, I drove a couple of cars where there wasn't even a digital speedometer display. Like you had to use the analog gauge.
You mean
really, like recently?
Probably a few years ago.
Okay.
But yeah, there was.
Yeah, I don't think there's many.
Yeah. And that was the thing. I was in disbelief because I kept going through. I was like, it's got to be in here somewhere. But
right.
Yeah, I think there was one or two that you just couldn't even pull it up at all.
Well, and the part that cracks me up is if you have it in the digital speed layout, it's like so small. It's like it's just the center of the screen, and it's like 2 numbers most of the time, right? It's like, hey, yeah, you're doing 40, and it just takes up such a small part of the screen that the rest of the screen's black. You're like, surely there's a more effective way to display this with all the other data that I actually care about. Or in this instance, I would say, like, if you just got rid of that left gauge, like that could easily be a bar at the top of a digital display that fills up the middle and left side of that cluster. Then you have a digital speedo on the right side, because I mean that whole like look at your throttle input stuff is like it's all digital anyways, right?
Well, and I think the main thing people are going to be checking for in a hybrid is that figure right there.
Right. Might as well have your digital speed readout as well while you're doing both.
All right, yeah. This is my last one. I love the brake hold feature that a lot of an increasing number of cars have this, and it's just so convenient.
Automatic.
Yeah, and certain I want to say the manual transmission Corolla has it, but it's just very handy, very convenient. I've got a long drive into work, and about half of it is just getting from my house to the highway. So a lot of stoplights, a lot of stop and go traffic. And this would really come in handy. Just make an already stressful commute a little more relaxing.
Yeah, this auto hold specifically for brakes, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if anybody out there is unfamiliar with how it works, you pull up to a stoplight when this is engaged and you press the brakes, it holds the brake for you. So if you're at a stoplight or a stop sign, you don't have to keep your foot on the brake. And then when the light changes or you're ready to go from the stop sign, you just apply the throttle and you take off.
It'd be cool if there was like a clutch version of this too. I can think about all the times I've been stuck in random traffic and my left foot hurts from modulating the clutch constantly for stuff. Like, sure, you could put it in neutral.
That's what I do sometimes.
But would be cool.
Yeah. There's, yeah, I've gotten a little too familiar with stop and go traffic living in the Phoenix area. So yeah, that would definitely help, especially when you got a real heavy clutch.
I'm not sure I've ever come around on these. I've been in some cars with them and I just always turn them off because there's something about it. Like if I'm at the front of an intersection, it doesn't scare me to use it. But if I'm like sitting behind a car and then, you're supposed to take your foot off the gas and just let auto hold do its thing, I can't. I have a mental block that prevents me from using auto hold if I'm behind another car.
See, I'm that way when I'm at the front and there are pedestrians crossing in front. So I'll jam my foot on the brake even when it's there. I mean, not, it's always worked as designed. But when people are crossing, especially really close in front of me, I don't take any chances.
Where something happens.
Yeah.
So if you have auto hold on, does it automatically turn off if you accelerate from there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So basically the way it works is if you're driving in the car, you just have it on in the background with like the little light on. And then you brake like normal, pushing on the brake, and then you come to a stop. Once you've come to a stop, the car then holds it.
So it's like the hill holder, just on flat.
Yeah. And I think some manufacturers, they have it work even when you're in reverse, which I don't like because I don't like that lurching when I'm backing out of a spot and it, brings it to a stop and then I got to power out of it. Just leave reverse as it is and then, use it, apply it only to forward motion.
Yeah, I mean, these systems are generally pretty easy to access, right? Most of these buttons are usually in the center console, kind of near the shifter. So like, let's say you knew you were backing out, you can just flick it up real fast and turn it off for that. Section.
That's true. I mean, I'd rather it just only apply to forward motion, but I imagine there are some people that like it for reverse as well.
Also be great for fast food lines, actually, now that I think about that.
Yeah, well, see, I'm that way. I'm the way you are when you're behind somebody using it in a fast food line. Like, I just put it in park. I don't want to take any chances. It's just, most of the time I like using it, but there are certain instances where I just get too paranoid.
People that put it in park drive me up the wall because you're that guy that when I'm behind you in the drive-thru, I watch your reverse lights light up as you're cycling through the gears, everything. And so I see all the drive modes. I just picture it in my head as I watch the cycle happen for the car.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I get you. Yeah. It's like, are they going to realize?
Food, and then there's that awkward shift. Oh, okay. Thanks for my food. No, hold on. Let me put my car or drive again. Okay, it's a drive. Put the food down. Now I can go. And now the person behind you is like, come on.
You're wasting precious seconds here.
Yeah. But sweet. All right. So with that is the wrap up of our standardized features. If you'd like to hire us for your next design, obviously these are mostly interior features. Which makes sense, I guess. It's where you spend most of your time with your car, if we're being honest. But now it's time to move on to our picks that are currently live and ending within the next week or so on AutoHunter.
Okay, so here we have a 1970 Charger RT. I realize for you guys, you think this is a gimme. This is like the obvious choice for me.
I almost picked this, yeah.
I wanted to find something else, but I thought this was just a good example. I'm more of a 69 Charger guy. I think the nose in the 70s ugly, and I think those fake door scoops aren't great either. But it's hard to deny a 70 Charger with a 446 pack. So that's what this has. It's got the longitudinal stripes, which was new for 1970. If you didn't want the bumblebee stripe, you could get that. But what I find interesting about this car, it's got the V21 stripes. So that code corresponds to the hood where it has the black stripes. I guess maybe we don't have a picture, but on AutoHunter you can find it. But the seller of this car also added the numerals on the hood, which were another option on top of the V21 stripes.
When you say numerals, just like
440 or Hemi, depending on the engine. In this case, it's got a 446 pack. The 444 barrel and the 446 pack just say 440. But it's got this nice pop art type of font to it. It's pretty cool. If I'm not a big Plum Crazy fan, but Plum Crazy is fine.
Great.
But I will tell you, and you may hate me for this, that This car, I think, would look better with a white vinyl top. That's just me. I like white trim on these cars. At least the purple
I don't
car.
think there's anything wrong with the white vinyl top on this car, but honestly, I like it either way. I just think the sort of boaty, aggressive muscle carness of Chargers is just fantastic. Good-looking cars.
Oh, yeah.
500s. This car obviously has a torque flight.
That'd be a great cruiser.
Yeah.
It'd be a great racer.
Yeah.
Man, yeah, those seats aren't... I know that everybody generally just calls individual seats bucket seats when we're referring to old cars, but these are not. There's nothing bucket about these that you drop into or hold you in place.
I don't think that existed back then.
Right, but it should. People, I like the current newer trends now where people kind of... these have a little bit of bolstering. If you look at like the passenger seat, you can kind of see how it sticks out a little bit. Not much. Obviously, it wants to build it to be more comfortable as you're driving it. I'm sure those seats look pretty comfy for long distance driving. But people build like retro versions of seats now that are modern, so you can like throw them into your older car and they won't look totally out of place. Like, they'll get rid of the headrest and stuff like that, so they don't look totally oblong. And then you have modern comfort and grabbing. But very cool. What was the 440 horsepower rating? Is that like 390?
390 for the 446 pack. I know they made, I think it's between 600 and 700 of these with the 446 pack.
Okay. All right, Cougar.
Yeah, another old school car. This is a 67 Mercury Cougar. I like this. It is cardinal red. It's been repainted once. But there's a simplicity to this that I like. It's not a super aggressive, like high horsepower version. It's got the 289 3-speed automatic. This is a one owner car, 100,000 miles on it. And like I said, it's been repainted, got the white walls, sequential turn signals, just an attractive design and an attractive simplicity to it.
I really like the wheels, how they kind of match the styling of the front and rear sort of, grills and stuff that go over the headlights and taillights.
Oh, yeah.
A cool blend. And those are wheels that I feel like I don't see too often. I feel like most of the Cougars, I guess I've seen are kind of like Resto Mods or the higher end, even Cobra Jet versions or XR7s or whatnot.
Yeah, they definitely fit it. Yeah, and just a good looking car. Now, granted, I am biased because, I've, as a sort of cousin to the Mustang, it's definitely has always appealed to me.
Yeah, it's the thinking man's Mustang.
I personally would rather have an XR7 just because it has a nicer interior.
Sure.
But, this is what it is.
This 289, I'm assuming, is a 2-barrel or is it a 4?
Oh, gosh.
Top of your head?
No, not off the top of my head.
Neither engine is really interesting otherwise. It's not a
V8.
The 4-barrel is not going to be a performance V8.
It adds, getting more gas is more power, or just, if you're feeling really aggressive, you just throw that Holy Sniper EFI kit on there for $1,000, and then you'll get some more horsepower. All right, this is my pick. This is a 1992 Chevrolet Corvette convertible. I have a huge soft spot, if you could call it that, for C4 Corvettes, and this car is no exception. What I really liked about this car in particular is, for one, it's extremely low mileage. It's 22,000 miles. And on top of that, it's kind of finished in the sort of traditional Corvette spec, with a white over red interior look. And obviously convertibles kind of have a special place as far as cruising cars. Corvettes are the best bang for buck when it comes to performance, hands down. And I always thought it was funny that these luggage racks turn into spoilers, like the little fake. I'm sure there's no aero benefit that whatsoever, but I think it's hilarious that they added it nonetheless. They're like, hey, we built the luggage rack. Hey, can you make that sportier?
You get 3 ounces of downforce out of that thing.
Yeah. And then, of course, this is obviously an LT1 car, being a later car.
So that's 300 horsepower?
300 horsepower. This one is an automatic transmission. But of course you get the awesome Aeroblade wheels, which I love. These are my favorites. I think the thing that's so good about these wheels is, like, I wouldn't even need to purchase any aftermarket wheels because I think these just look so iconic and fantastic. Obviously a fantastic car if you're planning on attending any Radwood events or anything similar like that this year. These are just great cars. And if you're looking for a convertible to road trip, the C4 Corvette has a 20-gallon fuel tank, and going off the EPA rating, you should be able to get over 400 miles of range if you drive it very lightly and keep your foot out of it. So these cars are amazing, and A fantastic car to take to a bowling green, should you be so inclined.
I think this should be your next car, Jeff.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm ready to fork over the money for a 22,000 mile example. That's probably too nice for me. This car appears to be in really nice
Nothing's
condition.
too nice for you.
But it's cool because this car actually has the MID. Obviously, the C4 Corvette's kind of an interesting one because it first came out with that, I believe it was called the liquid crystal display, which was a very wild display on the early C4 Corvettes. And then they kind of switched to this later, which is the updated dash style because I believe the early ones were kind of temperamental, even though they looked super cool. They can be considered a little bit temperamental, a little harder to replace. But red and black interior, very classic Corvette. And these seats, if you've ever sat in a C4 Corvette, these seats hug you tighter than your mother.
These are
amazing.
These are bucket seats?
Oh, yeah. These are proper bucket seats. These are like you fall into the C4 Corvette because it's such a low silhouette car that like you fall into it. And then once you're in the seats, you're like, oh, I am in my fighter jet. So this car makes an F-18 look like a couch.
And then you got that driver-centric layout right there, too.
Right. Which I think has pretty much been a like Corvette staple for a lot of the modern-ish Corvettes.
It's definitely there in the C8.
Yeah.
For better or for worse. I know
C7.
people have complained about it, but it's very distinctive in the new one.
Those guys just need to drive their cars harder. And there it is, the fuel-injected LT1 engine, 300 horse.
I've always loved that look. I mean, not only the unusual way the hood opens relative to most other cars, but then seeing those wide front tires, just such a great look.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the C4 Corvette is the biggest technological leap. It came with a bunch of cool stuff. You do have an independent suspension. This is also lighter than the C3 Corvette because they saved a ton of weight by using a transverse leaf spring in the front, as opposed to the sort of traditional heavier suspension method. So this is, it's kind of funny because I think Corvettes have famously used transverse leaf springs in the rear for their suspension. But this is now also using a transverse leaf spring in the front, which isn't metal, but I believe it's some sort of composite fiberglass thing of some sort that you can kind of see. It's hard to see when you look at the car because it's really kind of hidden down in there, obviously. But ton of cool technology that saved a ton of weight. So these are actually relatively light. So 300 horsepower is plenty fast. And of course, you get pop-up headlights that open in a unique and quirky method compared to what we typically expect for pop-up headlights. Not as cool as Opel GTs, but still very cool.
And then you'd mentioned before the really low radar profile for these.
Yes, yeah. So these are, again, they're so low profile that the radar detection distance is about half of the average car. So the cop would have to be that much closer if you were maybe or maybe not doing felonious speeds. So
you kind of have to in these. I think it's an unwritten law.
Yeah, absolutely. V8. Especially the convertible. Officer, I just wanted to see the wind through my hair.
He's like, yeah, you know what? I get you.
Yeah, I get you. He's like,
enjoy.
You take me for a spin around the block. You're scot-free. You're good to go.
I was telling you guys before, my buddy Jake, his uncle, when the C5 Corvette came out back in like 97, he got it. And, you know, there's a break-in period for the engine and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And Jake was telling me, he said, yeah, the first day he had it, he was doing $140 on the highway.
That's not an unusual story for Corvette owners. The amount of Corvette owners I've talked to that have hit me with some sort of 3-digit speed. Oh yeah, I hit 3 digits here, or 3 digits doing this. So every single Corvette, no matter who's driven it, has been over 100 miles an hour at least once, no matter the owner.
You got to give the America's sports car an Italian tune-up, apparently.
Yes, that's the best way to make it run right. So with that is going to be it for taking a quick look at our amazing vehicles that are currently live on AutoHunter.com. So obviously, thank you so much for joining us today. If you guys are interested in purchasing or selling your collector car, be sure to check out AutoHunter.com, which is our online auction with cars going live every single weekday. And of course, we also have our sister site, ClassicCars.com, which is an online marketplace, which has over 30,000 cars currently live on the site. And with that, if you enjoyed the video, could hit that like button for us. Really appreciate it. And consider getting subscribed for more content like this in the future. And of course, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.